My name is Samantha Brennan. I work with the Baja Magic Theater group. I made a presentation for Spark on Indigenous, Non-Indigenous theater collaboration, which was part of the symposium in 2020. I'm here to do a question and answer period tonight on that presentation. We're just going to get ready. We're supposed to start at 7 o'clock, so we got a couple of minutes. I'm going to start off with some questions that came in before the presentation, so I have prepared answers for them. But if anyone wants me to elaborate, please just let me know. And yeah, we'll just wait the next couple of minutes and wait for some folks to show up, and then we'll get started. I'm doing this from my phone, and this is my first time, so I'm just trying to... I saw someone's reaction, that was cool. I'm just going to pay attention as we go and see any other questions. You can just put them in the comment section. I have Rachel with me tonight to make sure I don't miss any questions or anything like that. And I'm just hoping a comment box will pop up for me as people do make comments. So just a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Hello, there we go. Yes, I can see the comments now. That's awesome. Perfect. And I'm attempting to bring up the video on my laptop here, which is sitting behind my phone. The reason I'm not using my laptop is because my microphone doesn't work. Oh, it's my pleasure to run this Q&A tonight. I'm really excited about this work. I'm really passionate about it, and I just love to share it with others. And the fact that other people are interested in it too just gets me really jazzed. So I'm very happy to be here tonight. Thanks for inviting me. Well, it's a good thing I am doing this from my phone, because it appears that the internet has chosen this moment to stop working, but I have data on my phone, so it's kind of perfect. All right, so are we ready to get started, or should we wait a bit? What do you think, Rachel? Hi, Gordon. Thanks for joining us. It's good to hear from you. I hope you're doing well. Hi, John. Welcome to the Q&A. All right, so I don't want to make anybody wait too long, so why don't we get started? I have, rural internet, exactly. We got a little bit of a monopoly happening over here, so we pay what they want and we get what we get. So I have 4 questions here that Rachel emailed to me a few days ago that were just coming in, just to have a couple of things ready to go when we got started. So I'll go through those questions first, and then if anybody else has any questions or any interjections at any time, just put them in the comments. I'll be able to see them in almost real time. That's okay, Rachel. It's all good. yeah, any comments on my answers, any further questions that come from the questions, anything like that, just feel free to type her in and I'll give you an answer as soon as I can. So the first question I have here is, hi Sandy, thanks for joining in today. The first question I have here is, has your work with the Baja Magic Theater impacted what work you might present, become part of, etc. in the future? So the answer is a resounding yes, and I'll let you know why. Working with the Baja Magic has definitely impacted my practice in every way. It has changed the way I think about my own stories. It's really showed me the value in my own stories, and it has motivated me to help Indigenous artists tell their stories in any way that I can. Sometimes that way is just stepping back and letting someone else have the spotlight, which I'm so excited to be able to do. For future projects, my work with the Baja will most certainly impact my artistic choices. I have had the privilege of many learning experiences that continue to guide my choices with the Baja Magic. For example, if I'm asked to work in an Indigenous, non-Indigenous collaboration and I sense an imbalance of power, I wouldn't be able to help with that project unless we could collectively figure out how to share that power. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're working in a collaboration with Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists, is that, like, historically there's just been such a huge power imbalance between Native and non-Native folks, and we have to do our best to leave that in the past and carry on in the future together. I noticed as well the massive hole in our collective history on Turtle Island where Indigenous stories and artwork should be. In its place is a version of indigeneity that was carefully curated over decades by non-Indigenous peoples of power to tell other non-Indigenous people the story they want to hear, the story that they want to build for the land that they've taken. This is, if anybody's ever heard Jesse Wenty speak, he talks a lot about this, and I just recently had a Zoom meeting with him, which was so awesome, and he spoke a little bit more about that, and I can't agree with him more. It was illegal, but during that time, they took the opportunity this is the non-Indigenous people of power, they took that opportunity to write the Indigenous story for Indigenous people. And this needs to change. And Indigenous artists are already doing the work. And now it's the job of powerful people in the arts to provide more opportunities for Indigenous stories to be shared. They're out there. Indigenous people want to tell their stories. Indigenous artists especially. Any type of art is storytelling, right? So providing a platform for that is doing exactly that. So I hope I answered that question thoroughly. And unless anybody has any questions from that, we'll move on to the next question, which is, do you feel there is a good way for non-Indigenous arts groups / collectives to reach Indigenous artists / communities? As a start to the answer to that question, there's a quote that I use all the time, and I will use it again in this moment. There is no right or wrong way to do things. If you're doing it in a good way, that's the right way. That being said, it does involve a little bit more than just good intentions, because we all know that even with the best of intentions, we can sometimes hurt others. I think the key here is in being genuine. So this is something I talked about in my presentation as well, being genuine and generous. The key is being genuine. If you are asking for their collaboration because you genuinely want or need their input and genuinely want to provide that opportunity for them, that's a good thing. If you're doing it just to fulfill expectations of funders or legislation, you're not doing it for the right reasons, although you may have good intentions following the TRC, whatever it might be. If you don't have a genuine want to actually help out with, to give a platform for these stories, then all you're doing is filling a quota. You're not doing it because you're being told you must, but you're doing it because you really want to. In fact, for anyone who does have an Indigenous quota to fill, I suggest that you shoot twice as high as what you're being asked to do. Dream big. Things can only get better as we go forward. Everybody will make mistakes. Everybody will backslide a little bit, but we got to do the work. It's not always going to be clean, but we got to do the work. One more thing I must mention in this is that a lot of times when Indigenous folks are asked to provide artistic input or to present, they aren't offered the same kind of compensation that a non-Indigenous person would be. So make sure you're offering a professional fee for professional work. Part of something that contributes to this is Indigenous folks who don't have a degree, somebody who doesn't have a piece of paper from a university that says, oh, I'm an expert in this. That doesn't make, you spend a lifetime learning something and you become an elder in that. That is hundreds of times more valuable than a piece of paper that it took you 4 years to get at a university. So we really have to give that the importance that it deserves. And we need to pay our Indigenous artists professional fees, period, really. I see Gordon said, a little comment about Jesse. I used to see Jesse Wente when he was with the film circuit. Yeah. Tammy Ray would know him too. He was an inspiring leader. Yes. And I feel so lucky to have him in this generation with us. He's done so much amazing work already. And it just really sounds like he's so busy and he's got so many titles right now, but he really is putting his whole heart and soul and mind into everything that he does. And I just bow down to him. So we'll move on to the next question, which is, what are some ways that small communities / individual people can support Indigenous artists / collaborations? This one's really important to me because I live on Manitoulin Island, and Baja Magic Creation Center is actually in Manitowoc, which is a municipality that's right across the bay from Weequamecoong. And I really feel like sometimes Indigenous artists, the Indigenous tourism in Weequamecoong, like all these organizations can really be left out by other non-native organizations, which I think is just absolutely silly, because so much more value could be added to anything that any municipality is doing that's anywhere near a reserve or near an Indigenous community at all. So we really need to partner up and start recognizing, municipalities especially need to start recognizing their Indigenous cohorts and start to put as much importance into powwows as they do their fall fairs, that kind of thing. As for individual people, actually this kind of applies to small communities as well. I have kind of a list going. So the first one is obviously buy Indigenous art. Easy. Indigenous art comes in many forms, every single form you could possibly think of and more. So if you're looking for a gift for your mom for Mother's Day, reach out to an Indigenous beater and see what kind of earrings she's got. There's so many options. And it's just about keeping your eyes open and making sure that you're paying attention to the artists in your area. The second thing here is like and share on social media. It's like the main form of advertising that we have these days, and it's so easy to share with people. Everybody's on it. That's kind of, I think, probably the number one way that you can really help get the word out about people's work. The third thing I wrote down, I just thought of before this Q&A started, which is offer your services. If you want to help an Indigenous artist, you can really do that by offering your services. Like, don't go in there assuming that they don't know how to do something. But if you're like an expert at using social media and you've, heard them talk about how they struggle with it, just offer your services, offer to help. The next one is suggest Indigenous artists when a friend is looking for something new. So same kind of thing. Like if someone is just bought their new home and they're looking for art to put on the walls, recommend some Indigenous artists in the area. And the last one, which is kind of goes along with that too, is know your local Indigenous artists. So that takes some work. Like you can't just look up on the internet like Indigenous artists. Well, you can, but it's not going to give you like a comprehensive list and what their phone numbers are. So it's really about like going out into the community, going to events, especially when COVID's not such a thing, and talking to people. Every powwow has like millions of booths that are just full of amazing artwork that people are doing, and usually people are like really excited to tell others about their work. So if you strike up a conversation, You're going to get to know that person, and you're going to get to know so many other artists through them as well. The other thing about knowing your local Indigenous artists is that one more thing you can do is brag about them as much as you can. Really let people know how much you love them. Word of mouth is 10 times more effective than any other kind of advertising, even social media. So word of mouth really, really helps. I'm just going to go back through the comments and check out what is being said, so I'm not missing anything here. Gordon, another question emailed to me today. Okay, I'll answer this one now. How can we as a community reach out to and welcome Indigenous touring artists to come into our community and present their work? That's a really good question. My mind goes directly back to community right away too. It's really about having a network and knowing Indigenous artists so that you can put a call out there. We do, every summer at the Baja Magic, we do our main stage production in Wickwamacong at the Ruins, and that's usually an original creation from the creators at Dubage. But we also look for a show to bring into the studio, so we'll have something in Manitowoc running, and then a couple of weeks later we'll start our main stage in Wiki. So the way that we do that is through networking. The last Indigenous artist that I remember doing a show like that was Leslie Parlane, my very good friend from Ottawa. Our administrative director, Joanna would be our administrative director. She was at the Talking Stick Festival in Vancouver one year, and she met Leslie there, and they just started talking, and it turned out Leslie didn't have a show ready, but she was a writer and a poet, and she had all of these stories ready, and she felt like there was a connection between them. So what she did was she emailed her stories over to us. We took a look at them, thought we could do something with them, and got back in touch with her. And then we collaboratively created a show, which was called Are They Thinking of Me? And it was awesome. It was a great show. It was a beautiful piece of work, and it came from networking. So I think the really big thing here is really about networking. Like I said, there's not really like just a plain list of Indigenous artists that you can just call. But starting to get to know Indigenous artists in your area is going to open up the doors across Canada and the States most of the time as well. Especially if everybody knows you're doing something really awesome, they're gonna wanna get in on that with you. So I hope I answered that well. Lori Jones here from Halliburton. Hi, Lori. You echo a lot of what I have learned the past several years. I thought you were talking about my voice for a second. I'm glad you weren't. That's awesome, Lori. I'm really glad to hear that. I just love talking to other people who are kind of walking the same path as me. Spark. Here's another from someone that couldn't join us tonight. Did you have any experience in cross-cultural experience before working at Dubage? And how did you get started at Dubage? Great question. Before I started at Dubage, I probably knew like 3 Indigenous people in my whole life. 3 people who weren't connected with their Indigenous communities. They didn't know where they were from. They were all, and that was because of the 60s scoop, the positions that they were in. I do have one friend who found out he was Indigenous like the year that I moved here, and he found out that he's Odawa, and he's actually Métis, but part of that is his Odawa heritage. And as soon as he found that out, he went to the Native Friendship Center, he started talking to people, and the next year I saw him at Wiki Powwow as a traditional competition dancer. So that was it was so gorgeous to see him like come into his full self that way. But other than that, like honestly, I never had cross-cultural experience when I was living in Niagara. That's where I'm from. I moved here. I'm here 7 years now on the island. And I actually didn't realize how big of an Indigenous population we have here in Canada. I knew a little bit about residential schools. I knew a little bit about, how things aren't really like they are in the history books that you read in school. But other than that, I really didn't know anything at all. So coming here was a bit of a culture shock, to be honest. And I came here through the woofing program at the Baja Magic. We're not running it anymore, but it was a volunteer program that brought people in to work in the garden. and to learn from Sunny and Ashley, who run the land-based program. It was an incredible opportunity. Me and my friends were traveling to try to, honestly, we were traveling to try to find somewhere to live, because we wanted to live in a rural community where we could build ourselves little houses and live off the land as much as possible, right? It's that old dream that kind of everybody has when they're in their early 20s. So the first place we came to was Dubage. We started learning from Ashley and Summer. We were asked to stay. So 3 out of 4 of us moved back here. The other 2 are gone now. One met a guy from Australia and fell in love and moved there. The other was my boyfriend, and that didn't work, so he's gone. But that's how I started at Dubage. And one of the first things that Baja Magic offered when I came was Sunny Ozalbana is a pipe carrier for the Odal Madewin, and he gave us teachings. So these are Odal Madewin historical teachings that are connected to the Peterborough petroglyphs, and every word that he said just resonated with me so much, and I felt like I've been waiting for this my whole life. Like, these were all things that I believed that, like, nobody, when I was living in the city, nobody in the city could understand why I needed to be out in the bush, like, 90% of the time. Like, why I felt like I needed to live more gently on the earth, and I couldn't just get away with, living in an apartment my whole life. And so, and it really, what that really did for me too was it sparked my own interest in my own Indigenous heritage. I'm not Indigenous to Canada whatsoever. I'm talking about like European indigeneity, which is like hundreds of years behind us, I feel. We're so disconnected from it, and it was something that always interested me. Even when I was 12 years old, I started looking into Celtic history and Celtic symbolism and things like that, because something about it was calling me, and I really felt like a little jealous because Sunny has these teachings and they're all so clear, and it includes this 18,000 year oral history of Turtle Island, and there's nothing like that from where my ancestors are from. It's not there anymore because of colonialism. Thanks, colonialism. But I really felt like this is where I should be, in a place where people are still connected to the land enough that they know what the animals are saying. Not everybody, but like, do you know what I mean? This is so hard. It's like a conversation with one person. But yeah, I just really felt really connected to that and really grateful to be offered that. And I just never stopped from there. I just kept rolling. So I guess that answers that question like really thoroughly. Brag about local Indigenous artists. All right. Please talk about the role of grandmothers and aunties in your work. So this question really resonates with me right now. Just a few days ago we were celebrating my official have lived on the island for 7 years day, so it's kind of my anniversary. And I had a memory on Facebook today of 6 years ago, really thanking everybody around me for everything that I've been given and this opportunity to be here and live on this beautiful land and connect with so many people in such a meaningful way. And I was reading this post, and my dog wouldn't leave me alone. She's like a really peaceful dog, but she kept looking at me. She's just looking at me, wagging her tail. And then I looked her right in the eyes, and I realized she was kind of looking like up and over my shoulder. And I felt, in that moment, like really connected with my mom. My mom passed away when I was 20, so like 11 years ago. And I felt really connected with my mom in that moment. And that brought to me this realization of like how incredibly lucky I am to be surrounded by all of these like beautiful, gentle, but powerful women. She would be so happy. And one of the reasons I'm still here, actually, is a woman who I call Nokomis. Her name's Jeanette Corbier Laval. She lives right next to the Baja Magic, and I lived with her for the first 2 years that I was here. she's just been so wonderful. She's been such a mentor to me. And it's that I'm too young to be her daughter, but I'm too old to be her granddaughter. So she's kind of in the grandmother auntie area. But I just find women like her to be so inspiring. And actually there's a woman here today as well, watching. Her name's Veronica Johnny, and she's been incredibly inspiring to me as well, and like an auntie to me. Their role in my work is I always have these strong women in the back of my mind, and they are actually what gives me the strength to do some of the really hard work that I do, because they really teach me how to love myself and how to love myself regardless of whatever. If I make a big mistake, it's not the end of the world. It's that comfort. It's that energy, that big auntie energy. And I've actually been creating in my mind a few projects that are related to that, because I'm kind of relating it to the loss of my mother as well. I have this project on the go that's in embryonic stage that the concept is advice from moms, because that's something that I really miss out on, because I can't. How many times do you just want to call your mom and be like, oh my god, mom, this happened today, what do I do? Or like, just even for little things, right? But I've gone through most of my adulthood without her. And the fact that I have all of these beautiful, strong women around that I can call anytime, who will be there for me at any given moment, I'm so incredibly lucky, and I would not be able to do what I do without them, period. I'm getting a little emotional here, guys. We here at Spark like to brag about artist and organizer Jason Manitowabi and the team at Dubage. Me too. Jason's awesome. He's done so much good work. He's been working really hard this year especially, I'll tell you. All right, Gordon's got a long question here. Our local cultural roundtable would like to set up an inclusion committee group. We were approached by a small pride committee last year. Oh, it is long. The pride committee last year, and that worked out very well. We would like to have a BIPOC representatives, but we have the issue of there being few non-white residents in our area. We do have a local Filipino group. We had a chat with an inclusiveness person employed by the Upper Grand School Board. She is researching the 6 treaties which apply to our border area. That must be so complicated. Our committee is conscious of avoiding having token participation. Yes, that's exactly what I was talking about in that last question too. How would you suggest we begin? Wow, that's a big one. Yeah, it must be really difficult when you don't, like, you want to include people but you don't have them in your area. So it kind of really sounds like the region just needs to, like, get cooler. Just kidding. I wonder, because I know, like, you're in Minto, Gordon, and I know that's in an area where there's a lot of, like, immigrant families and stuff, so I'm kind of at a loss for why your area is lacking in BIPOC folks. I'm gonna have to think about that some more. I might have to get back to you on that, Gordon. That's a big one. Okay, I'm gonna copy that down, and I will do a little bit of research probably and ask some of my colleagues, and then I will get back to you on that. Hey Samantha, speaking of Sunny's teachings, is Dubage still presenting those online for people to join? Yes, we're still doing the teachings every month. It's usually the Friday that's the closest to the 20th. So in February, it's the 19th. Here, let me check real quick. Yep, it's the 19th of February, and it's at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It usually goes to about 9 p.m., and then there'll be a question and answer period. I highly suggest tuning into this. The way to get the Zoom link, it's over Zoom. The way to get the link is to email storytellers@dubage.ca and just ask to receive the link. Or you can message Baja Magic Storytellers on Facebook. There is an event on our Facebook page for that specifically. So if you'd like to look up that information later, you can just check out our events page, the Baja Magic Storytellers events page on Facebook. Highly recommend. Chris, could you recommend a couple of entry-level books on Indigenous teachings? This is a tricky question too. Before I recommend, I'm going to just say that I think I don't want to say the best way. This is the best and only way. It's not the best and only way, but it is a way that, let me just say, Sunny's doing these teachings over Zoom. So this was a thing that was, it had to be approved by the lodge because the Odawa are very serious about preserving the oral tradition. So if you're going to receive the teachings, it's not going to be, like, we don't even allow the Zoom video to be recorded. It's not going to be from a recording. You can learn some of these teachings from a book called The Mishomis Book by Eddie Benton Benai, which is an amazing book that I also totally recommend. But I'd say the best way to learn teachings is to reach out to somebody who has the teachings, offer some tobacco, and ask them to share teachings with you. The oral tradition is there for a reason, and you actually get to ask questions, which is awesome. Instead of just reading the information and interpreting it as you will, you can really learn what they mean when they say so on and so forth. So that's Mishomis Book by Eddie Benton Benai. There's also a book that I just got by Cecil King, which is called In Between Two Worlds, and it's really more about John Baptiste de Siganac, who's from Manitoulin Island, who was Odawa, and it's about the history of Manitoulin Island about his journey through the treaties. So, I mean, it's not teachings, but it's like a really important part of history, and if you're from the area, it would be a really good thing to read. Mishomis Book, though, for sure, 100%. Also, Braiding Sweetgrass has a lot of good information in it. Anything by Leanne Simpson is like awesome. She wrote one called Walking on the Turtle's Back. That was Leanne Simpson. Yeah, that's a really good one as well. Sandy, one of the artistic movements I see growing is Indigenous futurism. I was just on a Zoom presentation today about Indigenous futurism. Well, it was about video game development and like smaller projects like that, but it was so awesome. Whether it's a fun thing like declaring Baby Yoda as Indigenous, or more serious work like Thomas King's The Back of the Turtle, or Sherry Dumeline's Marrow Thieves. I haven't read that yet, but somebody wants us to turn it into a play already. I'm seeing it in visual art too. Does that come into play in an organization like Dubage, which draws so much on traditional storytelling? Do they tell modern stories too? Yes, we do tell modern stories. We do look into the future, but we don't really write from that perspective. And that would be a really cool place for us to go, because we look back a lot and we bring that into the present, but we don't often bring it into the future. And that was so inspiring. Thank you so much, Sandy. That's an awesome question. I'll give you an example of modern stories that we tell. So, and kind of that stoppage that we have at, we're the past and then the present, and then we're not presenting stuff that's in the future so much. But we did a show a couple of years ago called The New Elders, and we were approached by Nojamuinteg, which is a health center on the island. They're doing a conference for residential school survivors, and they asked that we create a show about residential schools that's not about residential schools. So it was supposed to be about residential schools in some way, but they didn't want us to tell all of the bad stories. They didn't want us to be triggering anyone in the audience. They didn't want the mean and nasty stuff that we've all been hearing so much of in the last decade or so. They wanted it to be positive, inspiring, and future looking. So we wrote a show called The New Elders that was about a grandmother who had developed a hoarding problem as a way of dealing with the trauma that she experienced in residential schools. And she goes through a journey with her family, her son and daughter. Her son lives with her. Her daughter is visiting with her grandson, who's in college, and he's writing a paper about residential schools. And he knows that grandma's never talked about residential schools, not even to her own kids, but he wants to try to get some information out of her. But what he wants to do is he wants to write about the positive things, like reclaiming your culture, like coming back into your language and learning how to share it with your family. Looking forward towards the future. He becomes a language speaker by the end of the show. He's it's just a really beautiful expression of how things can be if we do the work. So that's a little bit forward looking, but it's not Indigenous futurism really. But we have a really awesome animator working with us named Daniel Recollet. He just finished the Daniel Recollet Majaki. He just finished the student program in April last year, and ever since then he's been writing insane, awesome stories. One of the first things he started to do was write his own Nanabush stories. So we did a show, not this Christmas show, but the one in 2019, I guess it would have been. It's called The Disconnected Christmas, and it's all based off this legend that he wrote that's called Nanabush in the Spirit of Wi-Fi. So I won't go too deep into the plot of the story, but you can see how traditional ideas and themes and ways of telling stories can be brought into the modern age, and I just think Dan's so brilliant. And there's going to be more of that in the future. He wrote one called Nanabush in the Spirit of Rhythm as well. Yeah, awesome dude. Thank you so much for being so personal and open with your story. No problem. Anytime. Beautiful spirit visit. Thanks, Veronica. You're the best. Yes, and that's a great answer too, Veronica. Asking questions, for sure. You show that genuine curiosity. That's an awesome place to start. Lori's hunting for her charging cord. Thanks for joining us, Lori. Yes, Gordon, I will get back to you on that for sure. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing those links. Between Two Worlds, yes. Awesome. Braiding Sweetgrass, yes, by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Yeah, that's right. Awesome, thank you. Nanabush in the Spirit of Wi-Fi sounds awesome. I know, we need to film these things. So this is one of the things that we're working on as we go forward, is like, what can we digitize? But we want to do it really well. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. We're getting, I heard that we're going to be getting a production stylist, so we'll actually have somebody doing our hair and makeup instead of doing it ourselves, and like really thinking about how the character looks, instead of the actors doing that for themselves, which is a lot to carry, as somebody who's just supposed to be displaying a character. Just gonna stop my computer from dying here. All right. Awesome. I believe I have one more question on here, so I'll just go ahead with this last question, and if anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the comments now, and then I'll just get to them as soon as I'm done answering this one. This one says, thanks for your presentation. Are there ways for non-Indigenous artists to learn more about the history of Indigenous art in our country and community? I love that somebody really want people to want to learn this. Well, you're very welcome for the presentation. It was an honor and a pleasure. There are many ways a non-Indigenous artist can learn about the history of Indigenous art locally and nationally. Of course, a quick Google search will bring up all sorts of encyclopedia entries and the like. However, these are usually written by non-Indigenous folks who learned about this history from other non-Indigenous folks. And this is part of what I was talking about earlier, about the hole in our collective history. And I think it's important for artists to learn about Indigenous art, but I also think that the story should be coming from Indigenous voices, if they're willing to share. So I will suggest connecting with Indigenous communities. Again, it always comes back around to community. This is one really big thing I've been learning from doing this kind of work. It all comes back around to community. Start local with local Indigenous communities and work outwards, but you're going to find that there's going to be so much. Your local community will be so rich with stories about artists and their work that it's going to take a long time. Many Indigenous communities have historical or heritage organizations, so this is a really important thing too, and would be also, Gordon, that would be an awesome place to reach out to for collaborators, is any historical or heritage organizations that are Indigenous in your area. For example, Wickwamacong has the Wickwamacong Heritage Organization. So there it is right there. It's an awesome organization who employs many elders, many language speakers, and they are just chock full of knowledge and love to sit down and chat about it. So these organizations, they hold both oral and written histories of the area. So a lot of times they'll be able to give you some files, some photos, a lot of photos. And usually the photos they are usually written by Jesuits or Canadian artists, a lot of times non-Indigenous artists. The photos will have notes on them that tell you kind of what's going on in the photo, where exactly it is, because a lot of time in these photos you don't really know the place you're looking at, but it's a place that you see every day because it looks so different now. It's amazing the way that we've changed the landscape in the last 100 years. These organizations are a great place to reach out to. You may also reach out to individuals, especially artists, but be aware of what you're asking, and what you're asking for and the amount of labor involved. It would be wise to offer something in return for this knowledge if someone's willing to share that knowledge with you, but also be ready to get a no as an answer, which is okay too. It doesn't hurt to ask, but be ready for somebody to say no, because it's a lot of work to teach people. I find that, I think I talked about this in my presentation too, non-Indigenous people are always asking Indigenous people, what can I do? How can I help? It's a lot of work to figure out how to include you. So just always be mindful about how much work you're asking Indigenous folks to do for you. I think that answers that pretty good. We're all nodding our heads. Thank you, Chris. My name is Samantha too. I'm the outreach coordinator for Carousel Players at TYA Company in Niagara. Oh, Niagara, all right. And I'm interested to know more about your personal journey. You talked a lot about reconciliation in the presentation, and I'm curious to know how you started developing reconciliation in yourself and with your ancestors. That is such a good question, and it's something I think about often. So I guess where that really started for me was coming to Dubage and hearing Sonny's teachings especially, because one of the things that he talks about in his teachings is that these teachings are for everyone, and that kind of shocked me, because of the injustices against Indigenous people by the hands of non-Indigenous people like my ancestors. The fact that the generosity is still there, that Sonny wanted to share these things with me, regardless of what my ancestry was. It's just the ancestors felt that the message that he was giving was so important that it needs to be carried on. And the teachings are tools. If you don't pick them up and use them, they rust. They just sit there. They're not useful. So anybody who's willing to use the teachings, I think, regardless of heritage, it's really important for these things to be carried on, because they teach us how to survive on this land. And that's something that, like, I think a lot of people are only coming into now in these times of crisis, when they're realizing like, oh, the environment, we're not doing so good. Now there's this big virus. Like, if we just went and lived in the bush where there was nobody else, it'd be pretty safe out there. So having those skills and knowing how to survive out there, like not just physically, but also emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, are super important. And I feel like in a way my ancestors brought me here, because they want me to learn this. They want me to be at home here on this land that is not my ancestral home. So that really got me started. And it really got me thinking as well about forgiveness. I think one of the first things that I had to do was forgive my ancestors so that I could open myself up to accepting these teachings. Because if you live in that guilt, if you let yourself live in that guilt, you won't allow yourself to be gifted with these things. And not only is that not what Sunny wanted, but it's also not good for me, and it's not good for anybody. There's a teaching about the oak tree, about the roots of the oak tree. Please tune into Sunny's teachings, because you're going to hear a lot more about this, and it will really help you understand how I started on this journey of reconciliation with myself, and with my own ancestors. There's a teaching about the roots of the oak tree that talks about forgiveness. One of the diamond teachings is denial, acceptance, forgiveness. And when you're feeling guilt, when you're saying, if only my ancestors didn't do that, or if you're saying, oh, I didn't do that, it's not my fault. This is all denial. And if you can't get past that denial and accept what happened and say, yes, my ancestors did have a hand in this, and cry it out, like feel it, like let yourself feel it so that you can let it go through you and you can move forward. Just going past denial into acceptance. So yes, my ancestors did do this. Yes, injustices are still being played out against Indigenous people at the hands of the government that I'm supporting by paying taxes, by simply living. Accepting all of that whole realm. And then you can move on to forgiveness, and you can forgive your ancestors. It's hard. It's really hard when you have all the information. But you can do that. You, just like you might be able to forgive someone who committed an atrocity against you. If you've ever been, like, even if you've been called like a nasty name, you can forgive that person, because it's not your job to carry that responsibility. It's not your job to let it ruin you, because that's not going to be useful to anybody. I hope that was a good start to that answer. There's so much more of it. I think part of it too was learning more about what my ancestors were like back in a time where people were still living off the land, specifically in Ireland, and Northern Europe as well, the Scandinavian region. Learning a little bit more about what that life might have been like, and learning I felt like I was learning who they are, and it's not these, Vikings a little bit. It's not these, I don't believe that it's people with intentions to want to get rid of a whole group of people from a landmass that they want to now live on. I think there's a lot more things involved in that. And at the core of it, like, I don't think my Irish farmer ancestors wanted to even leave their land, but, the Romans came. There's just so much of a history of cyclical, and I feel like in my blood, there are so many times that my people were conquered and thrown into the bush. I recently heard a story about the Brennans in Ireland. One of the branches of the family, when the Romans came and took over their temples and basically what they did was they like burned down a bunch of houses. They took all the valuables and destroyed them, and they took over their temples and they started putting Catholic symbols within them. And this one sect of the Brennan family just ran to the bush. So they set up a little village in the bush. They lived there. They stole a bunch of horses so they could get around. And then what they did in a couple of months when the Romans had built things up was they came back and they burnt everything to the ground. They stole all the gold, they burnt everything to the ground, and they traveled to somewhere else in Ireland, probably where the other Brennans were, because family means a lot in times like that. I feel like I'm babbling about that, so I'm going to move on. But yes, thank you for that question, Samantha. That was awesome. Good reminder for me too. Veronica, also I'd add make a generous offering when asking knowledge keepers for anything. Absolutely. That is super important. Always make a generous offering when asking knowledge keepers for anything. Absolutely. Always give before asking. Always give before presuming to take something, for sure. Rachel's losing internet. For rural internet, yay. You're so welcome, Rachel. I'm so happy for this opportunity. Thank you so much for providing this. Veronica, I'm so happy I got to hear your voice and your wise words. Lots to think about. Thank you and everyone involved. Hi to Sunny and everyone at Dubage. Dave and I miss you all. Oh, we miss you so much too, and we miss each other so much. And I can't wait to all be together again. Hopefully, at least by the music festival this year, we'll be able to do that. Awesome. So thank you guys so much for being here today. I know I said that like a question, but it was a statement. And that's all of the questions that I had prepared. And I think that's all the questions in the comments that I've answered as well. So if anybody has anything further that they want to talk about, I'm always available. No song. I'm always available at sam.b@dubage.ca. You can always reach me by email. I'm working from home right now, 10 to 5, generally 10 to 5. So yeah, shoot me an email. Any further questions, any offers for collaborations, any crazy ideas that you came up with, anything like that, please reach out. I love doing this work. I'm so passionate about it. And I'm so grateful for this platform that Spark has provided. Thank you so much, Spark. It's been amazing the last few years of discovering Spark and really getting to know all of you. And I'm just blown away by the work that you do, especially Rachel. You work so hard, Rachel. Thank you so much. Just kidding. Thank you again and have a lovely evening. Thank you to everyone for adding in questions and joining us tonight. Join us again on February 25th for Dr. Daryl Manitowabi's Q&A. Yes, Daryl. Oh. Thanks, Samantha. One of the best virtual events in this strange world. Thank you. Thanks so much, Gordon. Oh, it's Wednesday, February 24th. Yes, that's right. It is a Wednesday night. And that'll be at 7 p.m. again, I believe. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, guys. My email is sam.b@dubage.ca if you ever have any questions. I'm going to close her up for the night. Thank you so much. Mwah.